You ever feel gravity? Not just the pull of dirt keeping your boots on the ground, but the actual crushing weight of a planet trying to swallow you whole. Most species out there have hollow bones. They evolved on garden worlds, soft, gentle. Then there's us. When the artificial gravity on the derelict station spiked to 10 Gs, the alien crew didn't just fall. They started dying. Bones snapped like dry twigs. The human he just sighed and got to work. Cole didn't join the coalition vanguard to be a hero. He joined because the dental plan covered full molar reconstruction, and after 30 years on the deep core mining colonies of Jupiter, his teeth were mostly chalk. He was a heavy grav rigger, short, dense, and built like a fire hydrant. His knees cracked when he walked, and his default expression was a slow, tired squint. Right now, he was squinting at a very old, very dead blast door on the precursor station they dragged out of the Lagrange point. "Readings are dead, Cole," Dave said over the comms. Dave was a 7-foot-tall, multi-jointed insectoid. His actual name sounded like a handful of gravel thrown into a blender. But the Coalition's Universal Translator software had a bizarre sense of humor and assigned Western human names based on vague personality matrices. The giant terrifying mantis was assigned Dave. The slender avian-descended tactical officer hovering near the rear guard was Chloe. The reptilian engineer holding the plasma torch was Wyatt. Cole didn't care what they were called. He just wanted them to stop standing in his light. "Readings are dead because the sensor array is coated in 3 million years of cosmic dust," Cole muttered, wiping a streak of grease off his visor. He jammed a heavy pry bar into the seam of the blast door. "Give me a hand with this, Wyatt." Wyatt stepped forward. The reptile's scales clicked against his hard suit. He gripped the pry bar above Cole's hands. "Fascinating architecture. The metallurgical composition is entirely foreign to standard atomic models." "Yeah, it's a real tourist trap. Heave." They pulled. The door shrieked. A grinding, horrific sound of metal tearing metal echoed down the empty corridor. The heavy slab of steel, or whatever alien alloy this was, slid back just enough to reveal a yawning, pitch-black cavern. The air that rushed out smelled like ozone and old copper. "Core room," Chloe chirped from the back. Her feathers fluffed under her transparent environmental dome. "Thermal imaging shows a massive central structure. A generator, perhaps." "Let's tag it and bag it," Cole said. He clicked on his shoulder lamp. A blinding white beam cut through the dark. They stepped over the threshold. The room was massive. Catwalks made of dark, crystalline lattice crisscrossed over a central abyss. In the dead center hung a machine the size of a city block, silent and dormant. At least it was dormant until Wyatt dropped his plasma torch. It wasn't a clumsy mistake. The floor simply shifted, a subtle microscopic vibration that knocked the tool out of his 3-fingered grip. The torch clattered against the lattice grate. A low hum started. It didn't come from the walls. It came from the marrow of their bones. "Energy spike," Chloe said, her voice pitched up bordering on panic. "Massive energy spike. The core is cycling." "It's a proximity defense." Dave clicked his mandibles, flaring. He unslung his heavy repeater rifle, aiming it at nothing in particular. "Fall back to the corridor." "Doors sealed," Cole said calmly. He was already leaning against the slab they had just pried open. It had slammed shut behind them the second the hum started. He banged his fist against it. Solid. "We're boxed." "Gravity manipulators are engaging," Chloe screamed. She was staring at her wrist comp. "It's a localized field. They're dialing up the mass." "How much?" Cole asked. 2 standard Gs, 3, 4. It hit them like a falling safe. There was no buildup after 4. The alien machine simply decided it was done playing. The gravity in the room spiked instantly to 10 times the standard Earth pull. The sound was the worst part. It wasn't a mechanical hum anymore. It was a wet, sickening crunch. Dave went down first. The insectoid's long, spindly legs simply exploded under the sudden weight. Chitin shattered like cheap glass, spraying pale yellow hemolymph across the deck. He hit the floor hard, his thorax cracking open. Wyatt was slammed to his knees. The reptile let out a breathless, wheezing hiss. His dense muscular structure held for exactly 2 seconds before his spine gave out. A loud, sharp pop echoed in the comms. Wyatt collapsed face first onto the grate, completely paralyzed. Chloe didn't even have time to scream. Her avian physiology relied on hollow bones for agility and flight on her homeworld. Under 10 Gs, her skeleton essentially vaporized. She folded in on herself, a crumpled heap of feathers and hard suit fabric blood pooling instantly behind her visor. Cole dropped to one knee. He didn't collapse. He was driven down. It felt like an invisible truck had just parked on his shoulders. The air in his lungs rushed out in a violent grunt. His vision tunneled the edges, swimming with black static as the blood in his brain rushed down toward his boots. He planted a thick, gloved hand on the floor. Silence descended on the room, save for the wet, gurgling breaths of his dying crew. 10 Gs. Cole stared at his boots. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal. It beat hard, it beat fast, but it kept beating. Status, Cole grunted. The word felt like chewing on gravel. Every time he expanded his chest to draw a breath, he had to fight the equivalent of 300 pounds of pressure sitting on his ribcage. Status, he repeated louder this time. A wet click came over the comms. Cole, it was Dave. The voice was weak, digitized, and full of agony. Carapace shattered, exoskeleton compromised, internal pressure failing. Cole turned his head. The movement was agonizingly slow, his neck muscles bulged veins standing out like thick blue cables. He looked at the giant mantis. Dave was a mess. His limbs were splayed out at impossible angles. Under 10 Gs, a creature evolved on a low-mass forest moon was entirely helpless. His own organs were crushing themselves. Wyatt, Cole rasped. No answer. Cole shifted his gaze. The reptilian engineer lay perfectly still, blood seeping from his nostrils, unconscious, probably dead. Chloe, nothing. The avian officer was a motionless pile of blue feathers and ruined armor. Cole closed his eyes. The math was brutally simple. At 10 standard Earth gravities, an average human weighing 200 pounds suddenly weighed 2,000. The human heart, a terrifyingly stubborn muscle, had to pump sludge-thick blood against immense resistance just to keep the brain oxygenated. For the coalition aliens, it was an immediate death sentence. Their hearts weren't built for it. Their bones weren't forged in the high-density crucible of a heavy world. But Cole wasn't average, and Earth wasn't his crucible. He was born on Jupiter Colony 4. He grew up walking in 3 Gs just to go to the cafeteria. He spent 30 years hauling tungsten rigs in deep shaft mines where the inertial dampeners barely worked. His skeleton was a reinforced cage of calcium and microfracture scar tissue. His heart was the size of a grapefruit, thick and heavily muscled. 10 Gs was hell. But it wasn't a death sentence. Not yet. I am getting too old for this, Cole thought. He opened his eyes. The control console for the central generator was situated on a raised dais about 20 yards away. The blue glow of its interface cast long, cold shadows across the floor grates. If he didn't shut it down, Dave would suffocate in the next 3 minutes. Cole took a breath. He forced his diaphragm down, pulling oxygen into his burning lungs. He shifted his weight, planting his right boot flat on the deck. Cole, Dave clicked weakly. The alien was staring at him. Dave's compound eyes were twitching. Don't. Heart will burst. Conserve oxygen. Shut up, Dave, Cole grunted. He pushed. The muscles in Cole's thighs screamed. The fabric of his hard suit groaned, the microservos whining in protest as they burned out under the strain. He ignored the suit. He relied on the meat. Bone ground against bone. Tendons snapped tight, feeling like they were going to rip off the anchors of his kneecaps. Slowly, agonizingly. The human stood up. Dave let out a sound that the translator couldn't even process. It came through as a garbled burst of static. Pure, unadulterated shock. To the insectoid, witnessing a creature stand under this kind of pressure was like watching water flow up a waterfall. It violated every physical law he knew. Cole locked his knees. He swayed for a second, his balance heavily compromised. The pressure on his spine was immense. He felt his vertebrae compressing, pinching the discs, shooting hot spikes of white pain up his back. He let out a long, slow sigh. Right then, Cole muttered. He took a step. It wasn't a walk. It was a controlled fall. He lifted his left foot an inch off the ground, dragged it forward and slammed it down. The deck shuddered. He dragged his right foot next. Thud, thud. He was sweating profusely. Inside his helmet, the visor began to fog. The biometric alarms on his wrist comp were screaming, flashing red warnings about elevated heart rate, skyrocketing blood pressure, and imminent vascular failure. He reached over and smashed his hand against the console, cracking the screen and killing the alarm. He didn't need a computer to tell him he was dying. He just needed it to shut up so he could work. 10 yards to go. He passed Wyatt. The reptile was breathing barely, shallow, rapid intakes of air. He passed Chloe. Dead. He kept his eyes on the blue console. 5 yards. Suddenly, a secondary tremor rocked the room. The generator pulsed. A massive, heavy support beam attached to the ceiling tore loose from its ancient mountings. It plummeted. Cole saw the shadow before he saw the beam. It crashed onto the deck, directly between him and the console, shaking the entire catwalk. The heavy metal girder, easily weighing 500 pounds in normal gravity, was now a 5,000-pound wall of immovable steel. Worse, the end of the beam had clipped Dave. It pinned the insectoid's remaining functional arm and crushed his primary oxygen line against the deck. A high-pitched hissing sound filled the comms. Line severed. Dave gasped. Suffocating. Cole stopped. He stared at the beam. Then he looked back at Dave. The console was 3 yards away. The beam blocked the path. He couldn't step over it. Lifting his leg high enough to clear the metal would throw him off balance, and if he fell under 10 Gs, he wouldn't get back up. He had to move it. Cole stared at the massive slab of alien metal pinning his crewmate. You're a real pain in the ass, Dave, you know that, Cole wheezed. He dragged his boots across the deck, turning his body toward the pinned insectoid. Every pivot of his hips felt like he was grinding his joints with a mortar and pestle. Capillaries in his nose ruptured. A slow trickle of warm blood ran down his upper lip, pooling in his thick gray beard. He reached the beam. Leave it, Dave clicked, his voice fading. The alien's mandibles twitched erratically. Lack of oxygen was shutting down his nervous system. Mathematically impossible. Mass is too great. I don't do math, Cole said. He didn't try to lift it from a standing position. His lower back would snap in half. He needed leverage. He needed to get under it. Cole let his legs give out. He dropped. He caught himself on his hands and knees. The impact jarred his teeth, sending a shockwave up his arms. He crawled forward, inching his body alongside the metal beam. He wedged his left shoulder under the lip of the girder. He needed to create a gap large enough for Dave to pull his arm and his severed hose free. To do that, Cole had to push the beam up. From the floor, he flattened his right hand against the deck. He brought his left arm close to his chest, tucking the elbow tight. He splayed his legs back, digging the reinforced steel toes of his boots into the crystal grating. He was essentially in the bottom position of a one-armed push-up, with thousands of pounds of steel resting on his back and shoulder. Cole closed his eyes. He thought about the deep mines on Jupiter. He thought about his ex-wife who took the dog and the good coffee maker. He thought about the pension he was absolutely going to collect if it killed him. He breathed in. He braced his core until his abdominal muscles felt like blocks of granite. And he pushed. A guttural, ugly roar tore out of Cole's throat. It wasn't a heroic shout. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap, tearing its own leg off to get free. His right arm trembled violently. The tricep bulged the fabric of the hard suit, tearing open at the seam. His shoulder joint popped. He ignored it. He drove the heel of his hand into the floor and pushed the planet away. The metal beam groaned. Slowly, impossibly, the girder began to rise. 1 inch, 2 inches. "Gods," Dave whispered over the comm. "Pull it out." Cole roared his teeth, grinding together so hard he tasted chalk. Dave didn't hesitate. The alien wrenched his crushed limb free, dragging the severed oxygen line out from under the steel. He clamped a 3-fingered claw over the hose, sealing the leak. The second Dave was clear, Cole dropped. He let the beam slam back down onto the deck. It cracked the grating beneath it. Cole rolled onto his back, gasping for air. His chest heaved. The blood from his nose was coating his chin. His right arm hung uselessly at his side, the muscle completely blown out, throbbing with a dull, sickening heat. "Cole," Dave rasped. The insectoid was staring down at him, his compound eyes wide with an emotion that transcended species barriers. Total, reverent awe. How milk?" Cole wheezed. "And spite." He didn't stay down. He couldn't. If he rested now, the lactic acid would cement his muscles, and he would die on this floor with the rest of them. Cole rolled over. Using only his left arm and his legs, he dragged himself toward the console. He didn't bother trying to stand again. He crawled, like a slug, like a beaten dog. He dragged his heavy, broken body across the remaining 3 yards. He reached the base of the dais. He reached up with his left hand, grabbing the edge of the console. He pulled himself up using the machinery as a crutch. The blue interface glowed in his face. It was entirely alien. Symbols that looked like geometric nightmares danced across the screen. "Wyatt," Cole coughed, spitting a glob of blood onto the floor. "Wyatt, wake up." Nothing. "Damn it," Cole muttered. He didn't know how to interface with precursor tech. He didn't have the finesse or the training, but he did have a heavy pry bar still magnetized to his hip. Cole unclipped the bar with his good hand. He lifted it awkwardly. "Manual override," he grunted. He brought the heavy steel bar down onto the fragile glass of the control console. It shattered. He hit it again, and again. He drove the bar deep into the crystalline circuitry below the screen, twisting it, ripping out handfuls of glowing fibrous wires. Sparks showered over his helmet. The machine let out a high-pitched dying shriek. and then the hum stopped. The invisible weight vanished. The 10 Gs dropped instantly to standard 0.8. Cole hit the floor. This time he didn't brace himself. He just let gravity take him. He lay there on the cold grate, staring up at the dark ceiling. Across the room, Dave sucked in a massive, ragged breath of pressurized air. Wyatt groaned his scaly limbs, twitching as blood flow returned to his brain. They were alive. Battered, shattered, but alive. Cole closed his eyes. The pain in his arm was excruciating. His back felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer, but the pressure on his chest was gone. "Hey, Dave," Cole whispered over the open comms. "Yes, Cole. If you ever tell anyone I did a push-up, I'll kill you." He let his head loll to the side and finally mercifully passed out. Waking up was not a cinematic experience. There was no sudden gasp for air, no dramatic snapping open of the eyes. Cole clawed his way into consciousness through a thick, suffocating layer of medical sedatives. The first thing he noticed was the smell. A sharp, sterile mixture of ozone and synthetic iodine. The second was the rhythmic, irritating beep of a heart monitor. The third was the pain. It started as a dull, heavy throb in his lower back, radiating outward. As the painkillers dialed back their grip on his nervous system, the throb sharpened into a jagged, burning spike. His right arm felt like it had been packed in dry ice and then beaten with a crowbar. Cole let out a raspy, pathetic groan. He tried to blink the crust out of his eyes. The harsh white fluorescent lights of the Vanguard extraction shuttle's med bay felt like lasers drilling into his pupils. "Don't try to move," a voice said. Cole rolled his head to the left. It took tremendous effort. His neck felt like it was full of sand. Gideon, the ship's chief medical officer, was standing over a diagnostic console. Gideon was human, which was rare for a fleet medic. He was thin, balding, and looked like he hadn't slept since the turn of the century. He tapped a glass screen, not looking at Cole. "Water," Cole whispered. It sounded like sandpaper rubbing against a brick. Gideon picked up a plastic squeeze tube and pressed it to Cole's cracked lips. The water was lukewarm and tasted faintly of plastic, but it was the best thing Cole had ever consumed. He swallowed greedily, choking a little at the end. "Easy," Gideon murmured, pulling the tube away. "Your esophagus is bruised. Your diaphragm was compressed so hard it nearly ruptured your stomach lining. Take it slow." Cole swallowed hard, testing his throat. "Status." Gideon finally looked at him. The doctor's eyes were bloodshot. "You want the medical terms or do you want the invoice?" "Just the bad news, Doc." "Right." Gideon pulled up a holographic scan of Cole's body. It was lit up like a Christmas tree, entirely in red. "You tore the long head of your triceps brachii completely off the bone. The tendon snapped. Your shoulder capsule is severely dislocated. You've got 4 hairline fractures in your lumbar vertebrae, 2 compressed discs, massive subconjunctival hemorrhaging in both eyes, and enough micro tears in your muscle tissue to simulate the effects of getting hit by a freight train." Gideon paused, crossing his arms. "You're lucky you didn't have a stroke. Your blood pressure spiked to 300 over 220. I didn't even know the human vascular system could handle that without the heart literally exploding in the chest cavity." Cole stared at the red hologram. He couldn't feel his right arm at all. He glanced down. It was encased in a bulky, translucent sleeve of biometric regenerative gel. It looked dead. "Is the arm covered by the union?" Cole asked, his voice flat. Gideon let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "Yes, Cole. The arm is covered. The Vanguard will pay for the tendon reattachment. You'll be in rehab for 6 months." "Good." Can't mine without the right arm. You aren't mining anything for a long time, old man, Gideon said, turning off the holo display. You're grounded, mandatory medical leave. Cole closed his eyes. The exhaustion was a physical weight pressing him down into the thin mattress. What about the rest of them? The silence in the room stretched out. The hum of the ship's engines suddenly felt very loud. Chloe didn't make it, Gideon said quietly. But you knew that. Her physiology, the internal trauma was catastrophic. Her organs were crushed in seconds. Cole nodded once a slow, grim movement. He pictured the pile of blue feathers. The avian had been young, a fresh recruit out of the core worlds. She talked too much about her family's roost back home. He didn't like her much, but he hadn't wanted her to die. Nobody deserved to die in the dark. Wyatt, in an induced coma, Gideon replied. Reptilian spines are flexible, but not built for vertical compression. He has severe nerve damage, but the regenerative therapies are taking. He'll walk again, eventually. And the bug. The door to the med bay slid open with a soft hiss. Dave didn't walk in. He rolled in. The giant insectoid was strapped into a heavy motorized traction frame. Most of his pale, chitinous exoskeleton was covered in synthetic resin patches, sealing the cracks where his internal pressure had nearly blown him apart. His left arm was missing, entirely amputated at the thorax where the metal beam had crushed it. He looked terrible. Gideon sighed. I told you to stay in the pressurized ward. I am adequately stabilized, Dave clicked. His translator box sounded tinny and damaged. The mantis rolled his rig to the side of Cole's bed. He peered down at the human, his massive compound eyes whirring and adjusting their focal length. Cole stared back. You look like hell, Dave. I am missing an appendage, Dave stated matter-of-factly. And my circulatory system is sustained currently by synthetic stimulants. I will survive. The regressive molt will regenerate the limb in 2 cycles. Must be nice, Cole muttered. Grow a new arm. I gotta wait 6 months just to hold a wrench. Dave's mandibles twitched. It was a nervous gesture, an insectoid equivalent of wringing one's hands. He leaned his long, triangular head closer to the bed. Cole, I have reviewed the telemetry data from my suit. I have analyzed the biometric logs. I have cross-referenced the gravitational metrics of the precursor chamber. Good for you. Sounds like a fun afternoon. I weighed 2.6 standard tons under the localized field. Dave continued, ignoring the sarcasm. The metal support strut that pinned me weighed an estimated 2.8 tons. Combined, the mass resting upon your musculoskeletal structure exceeded 5 tons. So, mathematically, your skeleton should have converted to powder. Your muscular leverage was non-existent. You operated from a prone position, negating any kinetic momentum. Dave's head tilted sharply. How? Cole sighed. He hated this part. Aliens from the core worlds always looked at humans like they were either defective apes or unexploded ordnance. Humanity was a new addition to the coalition. They didn't have elegant plasma weaponry or telepathic networking or faster-than-light biology. They were laborers, grunts. The people you called when you needed a hole dug on a rock nobody else wanted to visit. Dave, have you ever looked up the planetary specs for Jupiter Colony 4? A gas giant, uninhabitable. The moons aren't, and the deep core atmospheric mining rigs aren't. I spent 30 years working on a rig that hung in the lower atmosphere. The gravity there sits at around 2.5 Gs on a good day, sometimes 3. I hauled drilling equipment that weighed more than your ship. Adaptation. Dave clicked his eyes, shifting in a mesmerizing pattern. Generational exposure to hypergravity. Your species builds density instead of scale. We build calluses, Cole corrected quietly. He looked away, staring at the sterile white ceiling. It's not magic, Dave. It's just dirt and leverage. My bones are thick. My heart is stupid. I pushed the beam off you because if I didn't, you would have died, and I would have had to drag your 2-ton corpse out of that room. I hate lifting dead weight. It was a lie, and Dave knew it. But the insectoid didn't push it. You saved my life, Cole. Dave's mechanical voice was flat, but the cadence of his clicking mandibles carried a heavy, solemn weight. Among my brood, this creates a life debt. I am bound to your line. Don't start with that weird cult stuff, Cole groaned, closing his eyes. You don't owe me a damn thing. Just buy the first round when we get back to port. I do not consume ethanol. It is toxic to my nervous system. Then you can buy mine. Get out of here, Dave. I need to sleep. Dave backed his rig away from the bed. Rest, Cole. The Vanguard Command has scheduled a debriefing upon our arrival at Station Aegis. They are skeptical of our field report. Cole cracked one eye open. Let me guess. The brass thinks we broke the alien toaster on purpose. They believe the gravitational sensors malfunctioned, Dave said. They do not believe a human could survive a Class 4 gravitational anomaly. Cole let out a long, slow breath. The pain in his shoulder flared again. Bureaucrats. It was always the bureaucrats. You could survive the crushing weight of a dead civilization, but you still had to argue with a guy in a clean suit about the paperwork. Tell them to read the logs, Cole grunted. I will. Sleep well, Cole. The door hissed shut. Cole lay alone in the quiet hum of the med bay. He looked at his ruined right arm floating in its gel sleeve. He thought about the sickening crunch of Chloe folding in on herself. He thought about the immense, terrifying weight of the universe pressing down on his chest. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt old. Station Aegis was the jewel of the Coalition Vanguard. A sprawling orbital metropolis of silver spires, manicured biodomes, and pristine docking bays. It smelled like synthetic jasmine and recycled ozone. It was clean. It was orderly. Cole hated it. He sat in a stiff, unyielding chair in debriefing room 4. His right arm was secured in a heavy mechanized brace that locked his shoulder into place and ran down to his fingertips. His chest was wrapped in thermal bandages under his plain gray jumpsuit. Every time he breathed in past a certain point, his ribs reminded him that they were essentially held together by medical glue and stubbornness. Across the sleek black glass table sat Commander Caldwell. Caldwell belonged to an aquatic species native to a deep ocean world. He didn't sit in a chair. He floated in a pressurized transparent tank integrated into the desk. His body was a mass of elegant, translucent tentacles and bioluminescent skin that pulsed gently in the dim light of the room. Through the translation software, he sounded exactly like a middle management accountant. Dave was positioned to Cole's left, still locked into his medical traction rig. Wyatt, the reptilian engineer, was attending via holographic projection from the medical wing. Caldwell adjusted a datapad with 2 slender tentacles. The blue light reflected off the glass of his tank. Let us review the sequence of events once more, Caldwell said. His voice was smooth, patronizing, and completely devoid of empathy. Your team breached the central core of the precursor artifact. The artifact initiated a defensive protocol. This protocol, according to your logs, increased the localized gravitational field to 10 standard Earth units. 10 Gs. Yes, Cole said. His voice was raspy. Caldwell's bioluminescence flashed a brief dismissive yellow. 10 standard units is a catastrophic threshold. At that mass, organic life from any Class 1 or Class 2 world ceases biological function immediately. Yeah, Cole said darkly. We noticed. We lost an officer. A tragedy. Caldwell said, though the word held no weight. It was just a mandatory HR response. However, the telemetry from your suit specialist, Cole, indicates a sudden spike to 10 units, followed by 3 minutes of sustained exposure, during which time you supposedly moved. I didn't supposedly move. I pushed a beam off the bug. Cole pointed a thumb at Dave. The insectoid, Caldwell corrected softly. Yes, the report claims a support beam weighing approximately 5,000 pounds collapsed onto Officer Dave, and you, a human operating in a 10G environment, lifted it. With one arm, Wyatt chimed in over the hologram. The reptile's voice was weak, but it held a fierce defensive edge. I reviewed the optical recordings from my suit prior to losing consciousness. The human utilized a single appendage to lever the mass upward. Caldwell stared at the datapad. He let out a bubbling sigh that sent a stream of fine bubbles to the top of his tank. This is an administrative review, gentlemen, not a fiction writing seminar. The coalition relies on accurate field data. What you are describing violates the foundational laws of biomechanics. Cole leaned forward. His back screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He placed his good hand flat on the black glass table. Listen to me, Caldwell. I don't give a damn about your biomechanics. I don't care about your laws. We walked into a trap. The machine tried to crush us. It killed Chloe. It broke Dave in half. It paralyzed Wyatt. I did what I had to do to shut it off. I am not questioning your intent, Specialist Cole. I am questioning the integrity of the sensors. The Vanguard Command has concluded that the precursor machine suffered a calibration error. It likely generated a field of perhaps 3 or 4 Gs. Enough to incapacitate a delicate avian enough to injure the others, but survivable for a dense world species like yourself. The 10G reading is clearly a software glitch. Dave's mandibles flared wide. It was a sign of intense aggression. Commander Caldwell, with respect, I know what 3Gs feels like. I have trained in high-mass simulators. This was not 3Gs. My exoskeleton is rated for extreme pressure. It shattered instantly. The human lifted the beam. The machine registered 10 units. You are altering the facts to fit your limited understanding. Caldwell's tentacles curled tightly against the glass of his tank. His skin pulsed a harsh, warning red. Watch your tone, officer. You are speaking to a sector commander. Humanity is a probationary species within the Vanguard. You are laborers, heavy lifters. You do not possess the biological sophistication to survive a 10G event, let alone perform feats of physical impossibility within one. To officially log this report would make the Vanguard a laughingstock among the core worlds. Cole stared at the glowing octopus. The absolute arrogance of it. The blind, arrogant certainty of a creature who had never walked on a world that actively tried to kill him every single day. They sat in their clean rooms drinking their clean water, reading data on screens, and thought they understood the universe. They didn't know anything about weight. Cole leaned back slowly. He kept his eyes locked on Caldwell's tank. You're voiding the sensor data, Cole said. It wasn't a question. I am correcting a clear anomaly, Caldwell replied smoothly. The official record will state that the artifact malfunctioned and produced a Class 2 gravitational pulse. A tragic accident, but an explainable one. Cole sat in silence for a long moment. He looked at Dave, who was vibrating with barely contained rage. He looked at Wyatt's hologram, the reptile's jaw set in a hard, disgusted line. Then he looked back at the commander. "Fine," Cole said. Dave snapped his head toward him. "Cole, I said fine, Dave." Cole raised a hand, cutting the insectoid off. He looked directly into the center of Caldwell's tank. "You write whatever you want in your little report, Commander. Make it a software glitch. Make it a stiff breeze. I don't care. But let's get one thing straight." Cole tapped a thick, calloused finger against the glass table. "I signed a contract for hazardous environment operations. Under Vanguard labor laws, a Class 2 gravitational event is standard operational risk. A Class 4 event 10 Gs triggers a catastrophic hazard payout. It's a multiplier of 500% on my base contract, plus full medical, plus pension acceleration." Caldwell's tentacles stopped moving. "Specialist Cole, if I validate a Class 4 event, the financial payout to a probationary laborer would be unprecedented. The bureaucracy, dearbs, I don't give a damn about the bureaucracy." Cole growled his voice, dropping an octave, carrying the deep, gravelly rumble of a man who had spent his life shouting over heavy machinery. "You're sitting there telling me I didn't do what I did because it makes your math look bad. Fine, keep your math. But if you think you're going to use a software glitch to screw me out of my hazard pay, I am going to walk around this desk, rip the life support filter out of your tank, and see how well you adapt to breathing oxygen." The room went dead silent. Wyatt let out a low, hissing laugh over the comms. Dave stood perfectly still, his compound eyes fixed on the commander. Caldwell's bioluminescence flickered erratically. Red, yellow, blue. He was genuinely terrified. He looked at the human. He looked at the thick, scarred neck, the dense, heavy brow, the ruined arm wrapped in machinery. For the first time, Caldwell didn't see a laborer. He saw a predator from a high-gravity death world. "Are you threatening a superior officer?" Caldwell whispered. "I'm filing a grievance," Cole said flatly. 10 Gs, Commander. Validate the logs, approve the medical, sign the payout, or we can have a long conversation about biomechanics in the parking lot." Caldwell stared at him for a long time. The tentacles slowly uncurled. He looked down at his datapad. He tapped the screen with a trembling appendage. "The logs are validated," Caldwell said quietly. "Catastrophic hazard payout approved. Medical leave granted." Cole nodded. He didn't smile. He didn't feel victorious. He just felt tired. "Pleasure doing business with you, Commander." Cole stood up. It was a slow, painful process. He turned and walked toward the door, his heavy boots clanking against the pristine metal floor. Dave's traction rig hummed as the alien followed him out. As the door hissed open, Cole paused. He looked back over his shoulder at the tank. "Oh, and Caldwell." The commander didn't look up. "What is it, Specialist?" "Send the bill for the console I smashed to accounting. Tell them it was a mechanical failure." Cole stepped out into the bright, sterile corridor of Station Aegis. He had a ruined arm, a broken back, and a pocket full of hazard pay. He figured he'd buy Dave that drink. Then he was going to sleep for a week. Physical therapy in the 22nd century still relied on the oldest, most infuriating tool known to mankind, a rubber band. "Pull," Gideon said. Cole sat on a vinyl bench in the Aegis rehabilitation wing. He was sweating. His jaw was locked so tight his teeth ached. He gripped the handle of a blue resistance band with his right hand. The other end was bolted to the wall. The band provided roughly 10 pounds of tension. 10 pounds. 2 weeks ago, he had bench-pressed a structural girder. Today, 10 pounds felt like trying to drag a shuttlecraft through wet cement. "I am pulling," Cole grunted. "You're engaging your latissimus," Gideon corrected, tapping Cole's shoulder with a stylus. Isolate the tricep. You need to train the synthetic tendon to fire with the native muscle tissue. Pull. Cole squeezed his eyes shut. He forced his shoulder down, focusing everything he had on the back of his right arm. A sharp electric burn flared in his elbow. His hand shook violently. The band stretched exactly 2 inches. Then the muscle simply quit. It didn't cramp. It didn't tear. The neurological connection just gave up, and his arm dropped limply to his side. The blue band snapped back against the wall with a mocking thwack. Cole stared at his boots. His chest heaved. "Put me back in the gel. Just leave me there until I retire." Gideon marked something on his data pad. He didn't offer any empty encouragement. "The synthetic graphs are holding perfectly. The problem is neurological. Your brain is terrified of that arm. It remembers the trauma of the rupture. It's actively restricting the motor units to prevent another tear. So, my brain is a coward. Your brain is trying to keep you alive, Cole. That's what it does. You just have to convince it that the war is over." Gideon pocketed the stylus. "Take 10 minutes. Use the heat therapy sleeve. We'll try again." The doctor walked away, leaving Cole alone in the sterile white room. The air smelled heavily of antiseptic and ozone. It was too clean. Cole hated clean. Clean meant nothing was happening. Nothing was being built. Nothing was being dug. The door hissed open. Dave didn't use the motorized traction rig anymore. The insectoid walked in under his own power, though his gait was uneven. His tall, segmented legs clicked softly against the linoleum floor. The left side of his thorax was bare, a smooth, pale patch of newly hardened chitin where his arm used to be. Below the shoulder joint, a tiny translucent nub was already beginning to form. The regressive molt. Dave carried a small metallic thermos in his remaining hand. He set it on the bench next to Cole. "I procured this from the lower promenade," Dave said. "The vendor assured me it is authentic earth coffee. The chemical breakdown suggests it is mostly roasted chicory root and synthetic caffeine, but I am told the psychological effect is similar." Cole looked at the thermos. He reached over with his good left hand, popped the seal, and took a drink. It tasted like hot dirt and battery acid. "It's perfect," Cole said. "Thanks, Dave." The giant mantis folded his long legs, lowering himself awkwardly to sit on the floor beside the bench. He was still too tall. His compound eyes were level with Cole's shoulder. "You are struggling with the resistance bands," Dave noted. "I'm struggling with everything bug. My back feels like it's full of broken glass, and my arm is currently on strike. I'm a heavy grav rigger who can't lift a wrench. I'm useless. That is a localized perspective." Dave clicked gently. "On my homeworld, a worker who sustains such damage is cycled back to the central hive to act as an incubator guard. They do not lift. They stand. Their mere presence is considered a testament to the colony's endurance. You endured. That is your value now." Cole snorted, staring down into the black liquid in the thermos. "I'm not a monument, Dave. I'm a contractor. You don't get paid to be a testament to endurance. You get paid to move dirt. You are well compensated. The catastrophic hazard payout cleared the Vanguard accounts yesterday. Commander Caldwell processed it without further resistance. Yeah, well, nothing motivates a bureaucrat like the threat of forced asphyxiation." They sat in silence for a few minutes. The hum of the station's atmospheric cyclers droned in the background. Cole drank his terrible coffee. Dave watched him with those massive, unreadable eyes. "Why are you still here, Dave?" Cole finally asked. He didn't look at the alien. "You're cleared for light duty. You could be on a transport back to your hive by now." Grow your arm back in the sun instead of under these garbage fluorescent lights. Dave's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound like dominoes falling together. It was a thoughtful noise. I explained this in the medical bay, Cole. A life debt. And I told you I don't want it. It is not a commodity for you to want or reject, Dave said simply. It is a biological imperative. You intercepted death on my behalf. My continued existence is a direct byproduct of your labor. Until I have balanced that equation, my chemical receptors will not allow me to return to my brood. I would be a scentless drone, a ghost. Cole frowned. He turned to look at the insectoid. For the first time, he realized Dave wasn't just being stubborn or honoring some quaint cultural tradition. It was biological. It was hardwired into his alien nervous system. Leaving would literally break him. Cole let out a long, heavy sigh. He rubbed his temples with his left hand. All right, fine. You want to balance the equation. Help me put this heat sleeve on my arm. The straps are on the right side, and I can't reach them. Dave stood up. He picked up the heavy battery-powered thermal wrap. With his single hand, he deftly wrapped it around Cole's ruined bicep and tricep, pulling the Velcro straps tight. The heat kicked in immediately, a deep, soothing warmth that seeped into the aching joint. Equation not balanced, Dave stated. But it is a start. We're going to a bar tonight, Cole grunted, leaning back against the wall. Wyatt is getting discharged from the medical wing at 1800 hours. You're buying. I will procure the ethanol, Dave agreed. And Dave, yes, Cole. Don't call it ethanol when we get there. It makes you sound like a cop. The airlock was exactly the kind of bar Cole needed. Wedged deep within level 4 of the station's industrial sector, it was sandwiched between a noisy cargo processing hub and a water reclamation plant. The lighting was mercifully dim. The floor was perpetually sticky. The air smelled of stale beer machine oil and raw ozone. There were no core world bureaucrats here. No pristine uniforms. Just riggers, dockhands, and mechanics from a dozen different worlds, united by the simple fact that they worked with their hands. Cole sat in a corner booth, the heavy polymer table scarred from years of abuse. His right arm, wrapped in its black compression sleeve, hung limply at his side. Across from him, Wyatt was maneuvering his hover chair into place. The reptilian engineer looked terrible. A heavy metallic collar supported his neck, keeping his damaged spine perfectly rigid. I despise artificial gravity plating, Wyatt hissed softly, adjusting his chair. It lacks the natural pull of a planetary mass. It keeps the beer in the glass, Wyatt. Don't complain, Cole muttered. Dave arrived a moment later, navigating the crowded bar with surprising grace for a giant insectoid missing an arm. He carried 3 glasses in his remaining claw. 2 held a dark amber liquid. The third contained a thick neon green paste. The bartender referred to this as engine degreaser. Dave clicked, setting the amber glasses down. He's not wrong, Cole said, picking up his glass with his left hand. Wyatt leaned his head forward, resting his chin on the heavy chest brace, and took a slow sip. His slit pupils dilated. They sat in the dim light. The bar around them was loud with laughter and arguments, but their booth was trapped in a heavy, suffocating quiet. Cole stared at the amber liquid. He hated this ritual, but he owed it to her. To Chloe, Cole said. His voice was low, rough as sandpaper. Wyatt closed his eyes. Dave lowered his head, his mandibles going perfectly still. She talked too much. Cole continued staring at the table. She was green, and she didn't belong on a dead sector salvage run. But when the alarms hit, she didn't run. She stayed on the comms. She did her job until the gravity took her. She was a vanguard. She was a vanguard, Wyatt echoed softly. Her frequency returns to the void. Dave clicked solemnly. May the dark be gentle with her. They drank. The whiskey was foul, burning a hot trail down Cole's throat. It was perfect. Cole wiped his mouth. So, what's the prognosis on your spine, Wyatt? Wyatt let out a raspy sigh. The cybernetics division will fuse a synthetic weave into my vertebrae. It will restore my mobility, but it makes me highly susceptible to electromagnetic pulses. I work on plasma engines, Cole. EMPs are a daily hazard. Wyatt gave a bitter reptilian smile. They are transferring me to the Theoretical Design Bureau. Desk work. My time in the dark is over. Nothing wrong with a desk? Cole lied smoothly. He knew it was a death sentence for a field engineer. They were all grounded now, broken pieces of machinery. Suddenly, a shadow fell over their table. Cole looked up. Two figures stood at the edge of the booth. They were tall, slender core worlders, blue-skinned, and dressed in the immaculate tailored flight suits of Vanguard Command pilots. They looked completely out of place in the grime of the airlock. Cole's left hand slowly curled into a fist under the table. He braced himself. He expected an insult, a joke about heavy-world apes drinking in a dive bar. The lead pilot looked at Cole's ruined arm, Wyatt's hover chair, and Dave's missing limb. You're the human, Cole. I am, Cole said, his voice flat and dangerous. What do you want? The pilot reached into his pristine jacket. He pulled out a heavy platinum credit chip and tossed it onto the table. It landed with a sharp clack. I fly supply runs to the deep core mining colonies, the blue-skinned pilot said quietly. My brother was on a rig that suffered a localized gravity failure last year. He didn't make it out. Nobody could lift the bulkheads. The pilot met Cole's eyes. Command is trying to bury the report. They want to call it a software glitch. But the dock hands talk. We know what you did. We know you pulled 5 tons off an insectoid under 10 Gs. The pilot tapped the platinum chip. Your tab is covered tonight, human. Drink well. Without another word, the pilots turned and vanished into the crowded, smoky bar. Cole stared at the chip. It held enough credits to buy the entire establishment. Wyatt let out a low, grinding chuckle. Well, it appears you are no longer just a laborer, Cole. You are a myth. You are a testament, Dave corrected. Cole slowly uncurled his fist. He picked up his empty glass. A myth didn't have a torn rotator cuff. I'm not a myth, Cole grunted. I just hate lifting dead weight. Now someone go get me another degreaser. The fancy pilots are paying. 6 weeks later, the Aegis loading docks smelled exactly like every other transit hub in the galaxy. Burnt propellant, cheap sanitizing foam, and sweat. Cole stood near the airlock of a deep freighter bound for the core worlds. He was wearing his heavy gray coveralls. His right arm was out of the mechanical brace, replaced by a sleek black compression sleeve that ran from his shoulder to his wrist. He could bend his elbow now. He could hold a coffee cup. But if the weather systems on the station shifted the barometric pressure even slightly, the synthetic tendon in his tricep burned like a hot wire. He was grounded, permanently, and he was okay with it. Wyatt's hover chair hummed quietly over the deck plating. The reptilian engineer had traded his grease-stained worksuit for the crisp, dark blue uniform of the Theoretical Design Bureau. It looked wrong on him, too clean, too rigid, but the cybernetic weave fused to his spine required a sterile environment. You look like a cop, Wyatt, Cole said, leaning his good shoulder against a cargo crate. Wyatt let out a raspy hiss. I feel like a data processor. The collar is chafing my scales. I spent 3 hours yesterday arguing with a supervisor about the thermal tolerances of a plasma manifold. He cited a textbook. I told him I had personally watched a manifold melt through a Class 4 deck plate. He filed a behavioral complaint. "Welcome to the brass," Cole grunted. "Just don't start drinking the filtered water. It rots your brain." "I will request shipments of engine degreaser from the airlock," Wyatt replied dryly. He maneuvered his chair closer. The loading ramp of the deep freighter hissed, lowering to the deck. A robotic voice announced final boarding procedures over the intercom. Wyatt looked down at his own clawed hands, resting uselessly in his lap. Then he looked up at Cole. The vertical slits of his eyes were wide, taking in the bruised, battered human who had dragged them out of hell. "I am going to design a localized gravity dampener," Wyatt said softly. "Something portable. A localized field generator that can be integrated into standard-issue Vanguard hard suits." Cole raised an eyebrow. "That tech takes a reactor the size of a shuttle to power." "Currently, yes. But I have time now. I have a desk. I have a budget." Wyatt's jaw set in a hard line. "No one else is going to fold in the dark coal. Not if I can build a shield." Cole looked at the reptile. He saw the guilt there. The same guilt that kept Cole awake at night when he remembered the sickening crunch of Chloe's bones. You couldn't save everyone, but you could try to fix the math for the next crew. "Make it small, Wyatt," Cole said, "and make it heavy. Stuff breaks when it's too light." "I will forge it from lead if I have to," Wyatt promised. He tapped the control stick on his armrest. The chair pivoted toward the boarding ramp. "Farewell, Cole. Try not to break the station while I am gone." "No promises." Cole watched the engineer float up the ramp, disappearing into the dark belly of the freighter. The heavy blast doors slid shut, sealing with a hollow metallic thud. "He will be miserable," a synthesized voice clicked from behind him. Cole didn't turn around. Dave stepped up beside him. The giant mantis was a bizarre sight. His left arm had fully molted, but the new limb was distinctly smaller than the right, and the chitin was a pale, translucent white. It looked fragile. Dave kept it tucked tightly against his thorax. "He's an engineer, Dave. They're only happy when they're complaining," Cole said. Dave's compound eyes shifted, tracking the freighter as it detached from the umbilical lock. "And you, Cole, are you miserable?" Cole finally turned to look at the insectoid. "I'm retired with full hazard pay bug. I have a pension that makes core world bankers jealous, and I don't have to wear a hard suit ever again. I'm ecstatic." It was a lie. A thick, obvious lie. "Your heart rate is steady, but your vocal microtremors indicate deception," Dave noted analytically. "You are a kinetic organism. You require mass to push against. Without it, your psychology degrades. Are you my therapist now?" "I am your shadow," Dave said. "The equation is not balanced." Cole sighed heavily. He rubbed his face with his left hand. "Look, Dave, I'm leaving Aegis tomorrow. Command gave me an instructor slot at the Orbital Academy over Jupiter. I'm going home. You can't come. Jupiter's orbit sits at standard 2.5 Gs. Your new arm would snap off the second you stepped off the transport, and your internal organs would turn to soup." Dave's mandibles flared. It was the same aggressive twitch Cole had seen in the debriefing room. "I have submitted a requisition to the medical bay," Dave said firmly. "Gideon has approved a structural reinforcement procedure. Synthetic resin injected directly into my exoskeleton. It will double my mass tolerance." Cole stared at him. "It's an agonizing procedure, Dave. You'd be deliberately making yourself heavy. You'd lose your speed, your agility. You'd be a brick." "You are a brick," Dave countered. "And you survived. I was born a brick, Cole barked, his temper flaring. You're a forest dweller. You're supposed to be fast. Don't ruin your body just to follow an old man back to a gas giant. Dave leaned down, bringing his triangular head inches from Cole's face. The alien smelled like sharp copper and dried leaves. You do not dictate my biology, human. You gave me the air in my lungs. You lifted the sky so I could breathe. I will carry the weight of your world because you carried the weight of mine. Cole looked into those massive, swirling eyes. There was no changing the alien's mind. It wasn't just a life debt anymore. It was respect. A terrifying, stubborn respect. Cole let out a long breath. The anger drained out of him, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. It rains ammonia on the orbital stations, Cole warned quietly. And the food tastes like recycled boot leather. I will pack an umbrella, Dave clicked. And I do not possess taste buds in the human sense. I will see you at the transport, Cole. The insectoid turned and walked down the promenade, his uneven gait echoing loudly against the metal walls. Cole watched him go. He reached up with his right hand, massaging the sore, stiff tendon under the black sleeve. He smiled. Just a little. The air in Simulation Room 4 was thick hot and smelled strongly of ozone and nervous sweat. 8 Vanguard recruits stood in a line on the reinforced deck plating. They were a mixed batch. 2 Core World aquatics in pressurized environmental suits, 3 slender avians, a pair of multi-jointed insectoids, and 1 human kid from Mars who looked like he barely needed to shave. They were wearing standard-issue heavy salvage hard suits. They looked pristine, untested. Cole stood in front of them. He wasn't wearing armor. He wore worn canvas trousers and a faded gray t-shirt. His thick, scarred arms were crossed over his barrel chest. To his right stood Dave. The mantis was visibly bulkier now, his exoskeleton dull and reinforced with dark synthetic resin. He stood perfectly still, a silent, towering monument to survival. Cole paced slowly down the line. His heavy boots thumped against the floor. You think you're ready for the dark, Cole said. His voice was a low rumble that carried effortlessly through the cavernous room. You read the manuals. You passed the VR tests. You know the thermal tolerances, the oxygen cycling rates, the emergency override codes. He stopped in front of one of the avians. The bird-like alien puffed its chest feathers out slightly, trying to look imposing. VR is a video game. Cole continued, turning his back on the recruit. In the dark, the universe doesn't care about your codes. The universe is cold. It is incredibly old, and it wants to crush you. Cole walked over to the main control console. He rested his left hand on the gravity dial. Salvage isn't about being smart, Cole said, looking back at the line of fresh faces. It's about knowing exactly how much you can carry, and knowing what to do when the universe decides to drop something heavier on your back. He gripped the dial. Brace, Cole ordered. He didn't give them a countdown. He just cranked the dial. The gravity in the room spiked instantly from standard Earth pull to 2.5 Gs, the heavy crushing weight of Jupiter's lower orbit. The reaction was immediate. The recruits slammed down. The avians collapsed onto their knees, their hollow bones groaning under the sudden massive strain. The aquatic suits hissed violently, their internal pumps working in overdrive to keep the water pressure stable. The Martian kid let out a sharp gasp, his knees buckling, but he managed to catch himself on his hands, trembling uncontrollably. Only Cole and Dave remained standing. Dave didn't flinch. The heavy resin in his shell held the weight. Cole just stood by the console, his posture completely unchanged. This was his normal. This was his home. Cole looked at the recruit struggling on the floor. "This is 2.5," Cole said calmly over the sound of their ragged breathing. "Your suits are screaming. Your hearts are working twice as hard just to keep you conscious. If a bulkhead drops on you right now, you die. If your oxygen line snags, you die." He stepped away from the console, walking into the center of the struggling line. "You don't fight the weight," Cole instructed, his voice cutting through their panic. "You anchor yourself. You find your center of mass. You lock your joints. Do not rely on the suit's servos. The suit will fail. The metal will break. Your meat is the only thing that matters." He stopped in front of the young human from Mars. The kid was shaking violently, trying to push himself up off his hands and knees. His face was flushed dark red. "Get up, kid," Cole said. I can't," the kid wheezed. "It's too heavy." "It's only heavy if you try to lift the whole planet." Cole crouched down, ignoring the dull throb in his ruined right shoulder. He grabbed the kid by the harness of his hard suit. "Plant your feet, lock your core, push the floor away, up," Cole pulled. The kid screamed a sound of pure physical exertion and drove his boots into the deck. Slowly, agonizingly, the Martian stood up. He swayed, his chest heaving, but he locked his knees. Cole let go of the harness. He looked down the line at the aliens still pinned to the floor. "The universe is going to put you in the dirt," Cole told them. "That is a mathematical certainty. Your job isn't to avoid the dirt. Your job is to make sure the guy next to you gets back up. You anchor each other." Cole looked at Dave. The massive insectoid met his gaze and gave a slow, deliberate click of his mandibles. Cole reached out and dialed the gravity back down to standard. The recruits gasped, collapsing in exhausted heaps, sucking in air as the invisible weight vanished off their shoulders. "Class dismissed," Cole said, turning toward the heavy blast doors. "Hit the showers. Tomorrow we dial it to 3, and I expect all of you to stand." He walked out of the simulation room, Dave falling into step right behind him. The air in the corridor was cool. Cole rolled his right shoulder. It clicked, a dull, familiar ache settling into the joint. He was broken. He was scarred. He would never haul rigging in the deep shafts again. But as he listened to the recruits groaning in the room behind him, learning how to survive the crush of the dark, Cole smiled. He didn't need to lift the weight anymore. He just had to teach them how to carry it. If you felt the crushing weight of this story, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It helps anchor this channel against the relentless algorithm. Did Cole's grit remind you of what humanity is truly capable of when the pressure drops? Let me know down in the comments which part hit you the hardest. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the HFY universe. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder that no matter how heavy the universe gets, humans always push back. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.